to apply it to a tax provision, which would be unusual.
Chair recognizes Mr. Minge.
Well, Mr. Raines, I'd like to compliment you on your stamina. You're up here on the Hill day after day, and we certainly appreciate your taking 3 hours to spend with us this morning. I have several questions that I'd like to try to go through quickly. First has to do with the problem of backloading that we talked about a lot in 1997. And the program changes that are being proposed, as I understand it, would be long-term or permanent changes in the law. They're not 5-year programs or 7-year programs. And the income stream that would support those programs, part of it would come from the tobacco settlement and part from other sources I'm not completely conversant with. And I'd just like to have you state generally, are the sources of revenue and are the offsets that keep these new initiatives budget neutral of a duration so that we don't have a backloading problem with respect to expenditures?
Yes, we've looked at that, and these programs are self-supporting. Our initiatives are self-supporting, not throughout the entire 5-year period, and indeed if you go beyond the 5-year period.
So that if we even go beyond the 10-year, these are, so to speak, permanent revenue sources or permanent offsets that you expect would match up with the expenditures, not necessarily every single one, but generally in terms of the architecture of this over an indefinite period of time.
That's right.
Okay. Secondly, we have had some ongoing discussion with the Office of Management and Budget and others in the administration about enforcement mechanism and sort of the design of the budget process to try to minimize the risk that we will get back into a situation where by hook or by crook we have a deficit and we're not able to control it as effectively as we apparently are going to be able to control it here in the late 1990s. And I would simply like to urge that OMB and the administration be supportive of whatever this committee comes up with. The chairman of the committee has appointed a task force out of the committee, and it's my expectation that we will be generating some recommendations to the leadership on the House side, and that these may well involve OMB and the administration in terms of procedural requirements. And so just to let you know of this and also to request your assistance and ultimately your support.
Well, we'll be happy to work with you on it. We're clearly desirous of seeing this budget balanced as far as the eye can see, and we think these procedural mechanisms have been helpful. That's one reason that we are continuing our support for them in this budget, and we'd be happy to look at what the committee comes up with and work with them to see if there's something that we can all agree on.
In looking through the budget proposal that came out yesterday, it's my understanding that the administration supports a continuation of the current ethanol tax credits that are on the books for the 5-year budget cycle. Would this be a continuation to the year 2007 or even beyond, such as been discussed on the Senate side and I think has been discussed with the administration at various points? Do you have any comment you could make on the ethanol tax credit continuations, which I understand are in this budget proposal?
The ethanol. Do we have the expiring provisions?
There it is, excise.
Which one is it?
It's
We do propose the extension beyond 1999 into 2000 through 2003, and I don't know. Do we know if it goes beyond that? I just don't. I'll have to get back to you as to whether it's permanent or if it only goes through 2003. I just don't have the information with me right now.
Okay, we appreciate that. Very interested in that program, which I think has been effective in trying to develop renewable fuels and alternative sources of energy. Another change that's proposed in this budget is fees for meat inspection services that are provided by USDA. And are you proposing in the budget to cover all USDA inspection work, or just that associated with the new regulations, which are the HACCP, so-called HACCP regulations? Are you aware of anything that could shed light on the nature and extent of these fees that are shown in the budget?
I believe our goal is that we have ultimately that these fees will cover the full cost of inspection in the plants, and that we think it's an appropriate use for user fees since this is part of the quality assurance being provided by these producers. And so it is our goal to try to get the fee so that we are fairly compensated for the expenditures by the federal government for this purpose.
There are just a couple of points I'd like to make so that you're aware of them. First, it's important, I think, to have a level playing field for U.S. companies that imported meat products have a parallel inspection process, and that those processors are also paying for that inspection service. Second, we have been establishing new inspection requirements, and there's some concern that we're layering one inspection process on top of another and make sure that we are not putting a burdensome and unnecessarily level of inspection plus a fee on the industry. And there's also been an ongoing concern about the possible conflict of interest this creates, because the inspection process is really there for consumer safety, and the industry has internal standards quite often, and that this may end up turning the inspection process into something that's much more responsive to the industry than something that's responsive to the consumer, and whether we should not continue the tradition of having this a consumer-based and government-financed operation, which would not lead to some of those misgivings about the inspection process. So I'd just like to point some of that out. Another topic...
time has expired. I'm sorry.
Can I just make one
Well,
concluding
I mean,
statement?
Yes.
I won't ask for a response, but I would like to ask or urge that as the dialogue continues here with Congress, that you point out to us areas in which you feel we could allocate any of the funds that are generated by the tobacco settlement or something else in an alternative way that would both meet administration goals and goals here in Congress. I think most of us here in Congress would like to see a long-term budget agreement that would be reached between the administration and Congress, and have a healthy debate over the substantive issues and not over some of the things that have derailed us this morning.
Gentleman from Tennessee is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Raines, thank you for coming to testify today.
Thank you.
I'm always fascinated when we get into a discussion of taxes and balancing the budget that we always seem to be referred back to with people in the administration back to the 1980s and how disastrous they were and how we cannot recreate the red ink from the deficits in the 1980s. And I always thought that the red ink in the 1980s was created by increased spending, really not from the tax cuts, because I'd always thought that the revenue had actually gone up in the 1980s. I was wondering if you had a copy of the...
Put the chart up.
And you said earlier